Hi, I'm Ali.
And I'm Becki.
We are registered dietitians that are passionate about food as medicine, and we use functional approaches to whole body health.
In today's video, we're going to be talking about why antacids and PPI medications are not a great choice to soothe heartburn, as well as 5 natural alternatives that can help to enhance your digestion.
Yes, so we do see heartburn on the rise, and later in this video we'll discuss why that happens. But we're seeing a huge influx of prescription of PPIs or proton pump inhibitor drugs, as well as high sales of over-the-counter tools like Tums and Antacids. The concern of this is often when you experience heartburn, it may be due to a physiological hiatal hernia, where part of the stomach protrudes into the esophagus. But for most people, actually, it tends to be hypochlorhydria, or too low of stomach acid in the first place. So when you take an antacid or a PPI actually blocks your hydrochloric acid production. So that further drives that hypochlorhydria, or too low of stomach acidity, and this can interfere with whole body health. What's more is when you lack optimal digestive juices or hydrochloric acid in the stomach, the ideal pH of the stomach pouch is supposed to be a 1 or a 2, literally acidic enough to break down a copper penny. So when people come at too basic of a gastric acid tank, they basically are going to struggle digesting foods. So food hits the cauldron or the belly, the stomach, and when they lack that acid, then the body tries to surge hydrochloric acid and they get that regurg at the meal time. What we like to do with functional medicine is address the root causes of chronic illness. So let's discuss first some of the reasons why heartburn occurs.
So I think stress is a big kind of unknown reason, and one of the reasons that under stress we can see increased heartburn is because we're actually manufacturing about a quarter of the amount of digestive enzymes that we would normally when we're under stress.
Yes, we're not in that rest and digest mode, we're sitting in that fight or flight mode, and that's not an optimal stomach pH being produced. Another reason that we can see concerns with ample hydrochloric acid or drivers of reflux could be dysbiosis. If you have yeast or bacteria overgrowth in the body, this can drive more dilation in the esophageal sphincter, or that valve that is to close, and that can further drive a basic environment which further perpetuates overgrowth of yeast and bacteria.
And then pancreatic insufficiency is another reason that we can see just making less digestive enzymes to break down our food in general.
Yes, so if you don't have the ideal chemical environment, you're going to mechanically try to make up for that, and that can cause some of that discomfort, cramping, and regurg. And we also see medication interference, of course, and diet can play a role. If you don't use it, you lose it. So individuals that aren't eating a high amount of animal proteins, for instance, like a vegan or vegetarian, if they start to introduce red meat or dense proteins, they may need to ramp up their stomach acidity because it wasn't required as low or high of acidity, low of a pH, if you will, to break down or activate the pepsinogen to pepsin, and that's the main protein breaking down amino acid.
And then I would also call out actually drinking too much water or drinking water with your meals.
Yes.
As a big reason that can dilute that digestive cauldron. So it would be fine and supportive to have a small amount of water, just enough to kind of wet your mouth and get bites of food down, or another beverage, but you don't want to be chugging like 16 to 32 ounces with your meal.
Right. So I've heard that actually as a terrible diet tip. Like order your entree and then drink a full glass of water, so when your food comes, you're full, but that's going to totally disrupt your digestive process. So before we go on to 5 natural tips, let's hit some of the negatives of the primary drugs that are used.
One thing, as Ali said, you're just putting a Band-Aid kind of on a volcano, and you're actually likely going to perpetuate digestive concerns because you are decreasing that acid and you're having less digestive process overall.
Yeah, so this can drive inflammation. Larger particles than desired go to the GI tract. This can create abrasion and damage along the GI tract, which can drive more food sensitivities or leaky gut. We can see chronic inflammation throughout the body. We can also see immune system impact because our gut-associated lymphatic tissue, or our GALT, resides in the intestines, and this can be disturbed from use of the PPIs.
Yes, and I would also call out that as you increase that pH of the stomach and have less and less acid buffer, you're going to see overgrowth of yeast and bacteria. So seeing more microbiome disruption for sure.
Yes, and then there are nutrient deficiencies that we see with chronic or long-term use of PPIs as well. Again, you need that hydrochloric acid to activate enzymes and even play an influence with compounds like intrinsic factor, which plays a really essential role in activating B12 absorption and utilization. We see in the elderly population, well, hydrochloric acid declines with age anyway, so it's important to note that as a driving cause. But the elderly population then, when put on a PPI like omeprazole or Protonix, that's going to further suppress their stomach acid, and this can make high case for B12 associated anemia. We can also see deficiencies in zinc, which can interfere with their taste and their immune function, and magnesium, which can drive chronic stress and muscle aches.
Yep, and even iron deficiency we often see in this population as well.
So now that we know that we don't want to put that Band-Aid on the volcano, let's talk about how we can rev up our stomach acidity to resolve that hypochlorhydria, or how to soothe the heartburn in the first place.
Sure. So I think one great tool is using carminative herbs. So these are things like in the mint family, so peppermint or spearmint as a tea or as a fresh solution. Even adding that into water. Things like ginger as well can help to really relax the intestines, decrease gas, and peppermint tea in particular is going to actually help to rev up that hydrochloric acid and increase bile production.
And that's important because that bile aids in the absorption of fats or emulsification, kind of the gathering of the foodstuffs, and also can support healthy bowel motility. So the next thing that we would bring in is actually boosting your hydrochloric acid also with the Bragg's apple cider vinegar. So this is a highly acidic, intake, actually shooting vinegar, like a tablespoon or two as a shooter with like an ounce or two of water. This is a great way to rev up your digestive juices. In my clinic, I've actually done a hydrochloric acid challenge with individuals when I wean them off of the PPI drugs, especially clients that have been on them for 20 plus years. So we're looking at using a combination of betaine, HCl, and pepsin, and we will increase their intake to tolerance until they get that warmth in their belly. And we ensure that they do eat protein at all of the meals, but we're increasing that acidity to rev up and reset the digestive juices so that we can truly resolve versus, again, Band-Aid or symptom manage.
Right. Seems counterintuitive, but actually works wonders. And like Ali said, more often than not, the problem is too little acid. And then also on a supplemental level, our Digestaid is probably our first go-to supplement for anyone who's dealing with heartburn or reflux. This is going to have some of that HCl in it. It's got ox bile to really drive that bile flow and fat breakdown. And it also has the enzymes that we need to break down carbs, protein, and fat, and kind of retrain the body how it's supposed to break these things down.
Yes. And now getting into some of the cooling and supporting. So it's important to note that if you've been diagnosed with Barrett's esophagitis, or if you know that you have ulceration, like a gastric ulcer, that you may want to stay shy of the apple cider vinegar until that's been resolved. However, all of the other recommendations would still stand. Sure. Just want to make that caveat. But okra, mucilagenous compounds, it's one of my favorite terms. Mucilagenous, meaning oopy goopy. So if you see when you cross-section the okra, all of these little pods are going to create a nice slimy gel. Okra is also a fantastic delivery of soluble fiber. This can help to support detoxification and bowel regulation, so aiding in bowel formation and movement, can be supportive of both constipation or diarrhea. And that mucilaginous, oopy goopy stuff coats and protects. So it's very soothing, just like a cooling aloe vera would be on a sunburn.
Sure. And then bone broth, I think, would fall into that mucilaginous category, which we've talked about at length.
Yeah, gelatin gummies would be a great thing to take, or doing like a jello with a homemade gelatin would be a fantastic option as well for that oopy goopy goodness.
Totally. And seaweed falls into that category as well.
Yes. So finally, next supplement recommendation is going to be our GI lining powder. This is definitely going to provide an immediate soothing as you take it. This has 3 ingredients. It has aloe vera actually, so that's providing this mucilagenous oopy goopy, very anti-inflammatory and cooling. And then it has DGL, which is diglycerized licorice root. This removes the blood pressure influencing part of licorice with still providing the ulcer repair support. And l-glutamine is in here as well in a pretty high dosage. L-glutamine is the fuel source and the building block to our enterocytes or our gut cells. So we use this in any protocol for leaky gut or any inflammatory bowel condition if we're talking about Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, diverticulosis, or any of the liking. This coats and protects the gut, repairs leaky gut, and it can aid in soothing the burn in the upper area as well.
Yes, and it could be taken on demand right when you start to actually feel the burn of heartburn, especially if you've been weaning off of a medication. And we can also take it at rise and rest depending on the severity of the heartburn or reflux. But why don't you show them, Ali? I'm not going to do it because I'll probably spit powder everywhere. But the way that Ali takes this is a little bit creative. And
we talk about it all the time on the podcast, so now we have the visual opportunity. I feel I must show you guys. So I'm a pretty low maintenance person, and I'm totally a get her done kind of girl. I don't like to dirty a cup. I keep my GI lining powder and my Relax and Regulate stacked right next to my sink. And before I brush my teeth, I literally just take a scoop of each like this. I tip my head back, I put the scoop in my mouth, and I follow with a swallow of water. So this is what it looks like, guys.
Let's show them how it's done. Now the alternative would be to mix that scoop of the GI lining with just a little bit of water, enough to create a slurry. So like even 2 to 4 ounces would be sufficient.
Yes.
If you're hardcore like Ali, you can totally just shoot it right into your mouth.
Yes, or if you don't care for the taste profile and you just want to get it back, throwing it behind your taste buds is a great way to get the therapeutics and then not worry about that aversion.
So hopefully you found this information helpful and can add something in that will actually help to enhance your digestion and resolve heartburn from the root cause instead of putting a Band-Aid over the issue. What functional medicine topics do you want to see us cover, or what symptoms are you guys dealing with that you'd like to see us address with a functional approach? Go ahead and drop a comment below so that we can address it in a future video.
Yes, we're always about empowering you guys with food as medicine solutions and, like Becky said, addressing the root cause. Make sure you also go ahead and subscribe to our channel and check out our gut health playlist, which includes things like our probiotic challenge, 5 reasons why you should include bone broth in your diet, and much more.
So hopefully, thanks. Excuse me, I'm having some heartburn. Do you see this thing?